Hello, everyone. Welcome to another cancer conversation. You are going to be so excited and thrilled, our next guest speaker. So let me introduce you. This is Lynn McTaggart, and it's interesting because I was in Whole Foods years and years ago, and there was a magazine called What Your Doctors Don't Tell You. And I thought, oh, wow. And I'm looking through it, and I'm like, wow, this is an amazing magazine. Like, why doesn't everybody know about this magazine? So anyway, I bought it. And then now, and many years later, I guess with my intentions that we're going to be talking about, I was fortunately privileged to meet Lynn, and now I write for the magazine, and we have a special series every month. So let's talk about Lynn. So Lynn is one of the central authorities on the new science and consciousness. She is an award-winning author of 7 books, including The Intention Experiment, The Field, which I read many years ago, The Bond, and The Power of 8. And her books are in 30 languages. She's also the architect of the Intention Experiment, which you'll be hearing about today. And this is a global laboratory, and she was prominently featured in the plot line of Dan Brown's blockbuster, The Lost Symbol. Brown even created a character partly based on Lynn, who ran Intention Experiments. She's a highly sought after public speaker, which we saw her not too long ago at a big consciousness conference. And she was one of the speakers along with many other great speakers. Anyway, and she has been appeared in many documentaries. What the Bleep, that was years ago. I watched that. Down the Rabbit Hole, I Am the Living Matrix, The Abundance Factor, The Healing Field, The One Field, and the forthcoming The New Galileos. A documentary about her work with the Intention Experiment and the Power of 8 will be filmed with Gaia TV. Gaia is very, very huge, so that's going to be amazing. And a co-owner of the magazine, the What Doctors Don't Tell You, that I just told you about, that all of you guys can sign up. She publishes one of the world's most respected U.S. health magazine, now in 14 languages. And she is consistently listed as one of the world's 100 most spirituality influential people in the world, and has received multiple awards. The New York Women's Press Club Award of Merit, a London Times columnist of the year, Global Woman of the Year, Spiritual Writer of the Year, and Champion of Change. And Lynn and her husband, who I have also done an interview with, Brian Humbert, author of The Timeline and The Untrue Story of You, live in London, and they have 2 adult daughters. So let's dive in, Lynn.
Thank you for that, Lynne.
Yes, it's wonderful. It's been a wonderful experience now with you, Lynn. So, and I just love the work that you're doing, because both of us have a true mission to transform the future of health and humanity all over the world.
And everybody, Lee Aaron's column is amazing. It is the most thorough. It is the most enlightening. And, you know, we refer loads of people to her. She is one of the leading lights of cancer, I've got to say.
Thank you. So you want to dive in, Lynn?
Sure. So everybody, I'm going to talk about the power of 8, which is about small group intention and how it can heal things in your life. And I stumbled on this back in 2008. As Lee Aaron said, I started running intention experiments after I wrote The Field because I felt there was some unfinished business. I had written about this quantum energy field that unites us like an invisible web. And I had talked about the pioneering work of many frontier scientists around the globe, biologists, physicists, etc., who had discovered what compounded into a completely new science, a new way of looking at the world, a new definition of us. But I'm an investigative reporter by background. You know, I started out life trying to put bad guys in jail. And so there's a part of me that finds it very important to find the evidence for things. I'm a skeptic until I find the evidence. And so after hearing about all of this, I saw there was a lot of evidence that thoughts are things, and not only things, but things that affect other things. So I wanted to find out how far we can take this. Are we talking about curing cancer with our thoughts? Are we talking about just a subtle effect like shifting a quantum particle? So I started a thing called the intention experiments, working with one of a number of prestigious scientists working at very credible universities like Penn State and Princeton and University of California, and also inviting my readers around the globe every so often to take part, holding the same thought and intention for the same target. And we set these up as scientific experiments. We've run 41 of them to date, and that's everything from trying to make seeds grow faster to purifying water to lowering violence in war-torn areas. We've done about 12 of those, and to trying to heal people of things like post-traumatic stress disorder. So my readers around the globe, or an audience, if I was speaking in front of them, would take part. Of those 41, Leanne, 37 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. There is no pharmaceutical drug out there, as you know, with that kind of consistent track record. So after I started getting these kinds of results, I wondered one day what would happen if I shrunk it down and just in a workshop of mine, put people in small groups of, say, 8 or so. And I was kicking this around with my husband, Brian. Said, well, we'll put them in groups, have them send healing intention to a member of the group with a health challenge. And he's a great headline writer. And he turned to me and he said, I love it, the power of 8. And that is how the name got started. And that's how I got started with this. I did it in a first workshop in 2008. I thought it was going to be a feel-good effect. That is not what happened. So I want to show you, instead of telling you, I want to show you what happens sometimes with just one Power of 8 group of 10 minutes. That's all we do. So I'm going to share my screen and
Okay.
show you some videos of people who have experienced this. Hang on one second, everybody. Things in the back.
So this started in 2008, Lynn.
2008, I started doing this, as I say, as an experiment. I did not expect what was going to happen. I thought it was a feel-good effect. It was going to be a little bit like getting your back rubbed. And that's not what happened. When people came back the next day for the second day of their workshop, they were talking about healings. One woman who had been limping badly with arthritis started walking in normally. Another person with feeling very, had clinical depression, said her depression felt lifted. Someone else with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, said that, her gut felt normal that day. And somebody else, the most amazing, with cataracts, said they were 80% better. So I spent about 10 years after that, before I published this book, The Power of 8, trying to figure out why. And it took me all that time to get the courage to publish this book, because I needed to know what was going on. So here are some examples. Here's what one 10-minute group intention did for Esther at a retreat of mine who had stage 4 melanoma. Our retreat, as they are every year, is held in this stately home in Yorkshire in the UK, where I live. It was the runner-up for Downton Abbey's location. So it's this amazing place with 16th century libraries. So that's what her son, Stefan, is talking about when he tells her story. That was it.
My mother said that she had a lot of bleedings, and I said, go talk with the doctor. And then she said, you have to get it checked out. So basically, the week after that, they found out that she had cancer in the uterus, in the whole body, metastasis everywhere. And the doctor said, you have 2-3 more months to live, and that's it. And what made all the difference was that one intention we did for her in the library, in this Broughton Hall, old-fashioned library. We had it was before we went for dinner. We said, let's do one here. We were sitting in a circle, and I was guiding and I was leading, and these 10 minutes felt like an eternity. And I know my mother. My mother is a natural doctor, and she's a therapist, and she gave so many people healing. But what I witnessed in these 10 minutes that really felt like an eternity was such a deep healing. We all felt it, but Mom said, she said, I'm healed. And, you know, maybe someone else would laugh about it, but I didn't laugh. We all didn't laugh. And I think that was really, and she sees it that way as well, that was the beginning of her healing, because that seed of healing was planted in that very moment. And the belief that she is healed and can be healed, you know, at the end it's always difficult to say what was it, what was the factor. But for her and for me, for all of us, it was very clear that that healing started then. And she didn't say, I am healing, she said, I am healed. Of course, there were a lot of setbacks in the process, and of course she did other treatments, all natural treatments. But for me, that very moment changed everything. My mom, they checked her up, the radiologists, they checked her up again. They do not find any trace of cancer anymore.
And she had stage 4 cancer, stage 4 melanoma, disseminated, and her doctors, her conventional doctors, gave her 3 or 4 months to live. When she came to our retreat, she didn't even think she was going to make it, and completely reversed after one 10-minute intention. And as Stefan said, she did lots of other alternative treatments, mainly 1 or 2 when she got back. No chemo, no radiotherapy, but the seed of possibility, because she had given up hope. And that seed of possibility, that hope, to me, is the best medicine of all.
Wow, amazing. That is amazing. Love
Now,
it.
what about people with genetic diseases where they say there's nothing you can do about it? So there was Lisa. She had a genetic liver disorder. It was an alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. You'll know what that is, Leanne. But for everybody else, it's essentially she was born with a deficiency of a certain enzyme that's really critical for her liver. So her liver was full of scarrings, fibrosis, and her spleen was enlarged. And essentially her doctors said she was a candidate for a liver transplant. And they checked her up all the time. So she heard about a Power of 8 group near her, run at a place called the Sanctuary. And so this is what happened when she went for the first time.
I heard that you come in at 4 o'clock and it's every 10 minutes, and I came in and you held the hands, and I did literally feel the healing take place. I felt it was very I got emotional, and then I did feel things moving around the body, and I left, and I kept thinking I could feel something in my liver area. Right. But I always remember in my diary, I wrote it down, about 9 o'clock that night I was in bed, and I said to my husband, I feel things shifting, and I felt immense energy going around the body, and then so shooting out on my left leg like a cold energy. Something was shifting, and more than that, in my head I knew that something had taken place and I didn't have to worry about it anymore. That's how I felt. And and I was thinking about this when I knew I was coming to see you today, I have never Googled alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency in a year. So then they called me up to go for a scan, and it sounds awful because people were watching this, but I kept putting the appointment off because I knew it wasn't a priority. Yeah. So something, I was on holiday, and in the olden days I would have, cancelled, but I was like, I'm fine. So I think it was about October time, I went for a scan, and I got a letter in November in black and white that said that my spleen is now a normal size, and I had no fibrosis of the liver.
How did you feel about that?
Just amazing. Absolutely incredible.
Can't happen.
Yeah. And I have the 2 letters. So you have the black
from
and white.
From a professor?
I'm my consultant.
Your consultant.
So it's kind of, it's black and white. We can't argue with it.
You can't argue with it. 2 consultants, and they are specialists in the UK in liver, for instance, liver disorders. wrote in black and white that her liver and spleen are normal now. Now, we just had this 2 weeks ago when I was speaking in San Diego, and when I saw Dr. Keneally, there was a guy in the audience who was paralyzed. He had had a problem with his spine. They gave him a particular drug, and it caused paralysis for 9 years. And he was still, his right leg was atrophied, and it wasn't moving. And he was dying to move it, as was his shoulder. At the end of my talk, as I always do, I put people into groups and said, okay, experience it for yourself. And this is what happened to Justin.
Hi, my name is Justin Ballard. It's my first time doing the Power of 8, and I had paralysis on the right side of my body for a year and a half. I couldn't move my right leg, and so I've been struggling with atrophy for about the last 9 years. In fact, I really want to play tennis, and so when all these women focused on me and my healing, I had this profound light come through my body, and I have sensation in my leg that I didn't even know I was missing before. So it's extraordinary. So I'm just really grateful, and now I want to go play tennis. So I'm really excited.
So I hope Justin is playing tennis as we speak. And Deb Malicio, now she came into a talk of mine, a workshop of mine, in a wheelchair. This is the second person I had in a wheelchair. Now watch this. She had wheelchair-bound multiple sclerosis, and this is what happened. Again, after one 10-minute intention. She was in the audience. I put everybody in groups.
My name is Deb Malicio, and I just went to the
Power of 8 intention.
Power of 8.
Here in Sedona, Arizona.
And I'm in Sedona, Arizona, and I want to show you what I'm doing with this.
Goodbye.
Bye.
So what do you...
walk. It was amazing, just totally amazing to me.
What was your diagnosis that you
I'm
healed?
sorry, I had MS. I've had MS since 1998.
So that's the second person I've got out of a wheelchair. Another woman was paralyzed from the neck down with idiopathic paralysis of, they didn't know why, of unknown origin, a young woman, and was a dancer. And she stood up out of her wheelchair at the end of 10 minutes. Now, all of these things happened with people who were in short groups. So I wondered, groups for 10 minutes, and that was it. So I started thinking, as I started seeing these kinds of results, what happens if I put people in groups for a whole year? So I teach them with the 13 keys of intention mastery, things that I learned from studying both the science and also intention masters, Qigong masters, Buddhist monks, master healers. I wondered, once I taught them in live and interactive sessions, what would happen if I put them into groups and I monitored them for a whole year? So I started doing that in 2015. And I started having them keep track of what was happening to them, because I wanted to know, would everything in their lives start healing? So here's an example. This is a guy called Mitchell Dean. He wanted his identity covered because he is a clinical psychologist who suffered from clinical depression. That's not a good look for a doctor, right? And so he wanted to tell his story because he'd suffered from depression all of his life. And he had tried everything as an integrative specialist. Nothing had worked. So when he got into the group, one of his main intentions was to try to find out the cause of it. So that's what his group started intending for him. So this is what happened. And this is also what happened to the rest of his life.
What happened right around the beginning of that time was realizing that a lot of this is related to how my liver processes toxins. And that had never been named in all the years I'd been working on this. And suddenly it became apparent that the second level of liver filtration apparently wasn't working very well. And we got a hold of that one, began to treat that with herbs and supplements, and it really helped. I think, though, there's something more synergistic than just an allopathic idea that this cured the depression. It was like at the same time, I found my Qigong practice was getting much deeper. My meditations were deeper. I was finding I was much more able to just take better care of myself. During that Helios time, my practice got much more interesting, and I began to integrate ways of working that I'd wanted to do for years that had never quite worked. And so all of those have their own sort of antidepressant effect, right? It was like everything got healthier. It doesn't go nearly as deep. It doesn't happen nearly as often. I can still have blue days, but they feel more like blue days instead of really, really heavy ones. And so it's made a huge difference. Yeah. In that same process, I lost a good 15 pounds. Yes. I mean, it was such an interesting time. My trainer at one point kept joking, I don't know what's going on with you, man. It's like you're aging backward. Like, this shouldn't be possible at 45 that your muscle mass is going up while your body fat's going down, working out once a week. What exactly are you doing, man?
What exactly are you doing, man? And he also overcame writer's block. One of his other intentions was to improve his relationship and his relationships in general. And he managed to put together a special program for his patients, a healing modality that he had developed. Everything in his life got healthier. And that was he wasn't the only one. When I looked at that first group, of the people who continued to meet week by week, and that was the key, the people who met regularly in their Power of 8 groups, pretty much 100% of them had some major life transformation. So I want to say one other thing about this before I show you one scientific study we did to try to figure out why this is going on. And I looked at many things. But one of the things that was really important in the whole process was the power of getting off of yourself, altruism. When I studied the science of altruism is like a bulletproof vest. People who do things for other people, who live a life of service, or even take out their neighbor's garbage, live longer, healthier, happier lives. Volunteers live longer, healthier, happier lives. Doing things for other people is not only a nice thing to do, it's a necessary thing for us to do to really live a healthy life. And I saw it in the Power of 8 groups. I started recognizing that it wasn't just the receivers who were getting healed, it was the senders too. Now I'm going to show you about
I went to bed
West
and
let me just wait, let me
the
get
next
back
morning,
to this before
when I woke up.
Let me just explain about Wes before I start on his video. So Wes Chapman, when I met him, and he volunteered for a Power of 8 group one time, had not worked with him before. He was a very sad person. He had wanted to be a biochemist or a doctor. So he was studying, he went to university, he was studying to do that. And on his very last year of university, of college, he got drafted during the Vietnam War, the very end of the Vietnam War, when there was no more student deferment. So he had to go. The whole experience was so debilitating for him, so traumatic, that he came back, dropped out of college, and his life went in a total downward spiral. He even lost the love of his life, who had a fast-growing cancer, and she not only died, but he was left with horrendous medical bills, and so had to lose his house. By the time I met him at 65, he had given up hope. It was hard for him to even get up out of bed. He was avoiding people, and his life had come to a total standstill. So this is what happened to him after being a sender, not a receiver, in a Power of 8 group.
I went to bed, and the next morning, when I woke up, it was an amazing thing. The first thing I felt was this energy. It was like the wheels are moving. It's like I can do what I need to do and do it happily. The second thing is amazingly heightened sensory awareness, as well as the emotions that go with the sensations. Like I had a cup of herbal tea and it like knocked my socks off. It's like, wow. And even like doing the dishes was, I could feel the self-love. You know, we all think, well, it's wonderful to take care of yourself, and this is an act of self-love and self-care, and it's easy to think that, but to feel it, you know, the chores are actually fun. And I noticed went outside a little bit, and I noticed flowers and trees are just so beautiful. It's like all my senses were multiplied by, I don't know, 5 or 10. And one of the surprising things too is I definitely had got in the habit of avoiding people. I tried to minimize my social contact, you know. And now it's like when I see someone coming, it's like I automatically feel enjoyment. It's like it just happens so fast. I don't have time to think about it. Here's a person. Wow, how are you? You know, and these good feelings come so quickly and so easily. When I went to bed that night, now this is the second night after the experience, I woke up in the morning with a clear memory of the most lucid dream, is what a rational person would call it. I call it a vision. It was so clear and powerful. I found myself back on the campus that I was at where I was drafted, and where, you know, I sweated that out, and there was a chapel there that I always liked, and I walked past it every day, and it's like maybe the only sacred space on that campus. And this is not easy to describe. My 19-year-old self was waiting for me.
Mm.
And I felt the most powerful emotions of love and connection and joy. It's like all of his high hopes, all of his beautiful dreams, all of his optimism, all of his youthful energy, you know, it's like, wow. Somehow I left all that behind, you know, in that trauma, in that when I dropped into survival mode just to take my draft physical, and God help me, you know, I guess I left that behind. But to meet him again, and he's been waiting there so patiently for me, and it's like, I got it back. Now with my experience and wisdom and strength and toughness, and, you know, his optimism and hope and joy, it's like, hey, I get to start life all over again at 65. I've done a lot of work over the years, but this is the most phenomenal, the most powerful, and the most direct.
1 10-minute intention, and Wes got his life back. He was like Scrooge on Christmas morning, running around saying hi to everybody. I corresponded with him afterward, and he told me he had started doing power walks and workouts. He had joined a course. He was learning remote viewing. He was writing again. He was involved in his church. I mean, he was a completely new person after 1 10-minute session of sending for someone else. And I see as many healings with the senders as the receivers. So I want to show you one last thing, which is one reason why this works. There is altruism. There are group effects. There's the power of group mind. It supersizes intention. But there's something else, and that is the something that we investigated with a team of neuroscientists from Life University, which is the largest chiropractic university in the world. They put a team of neuroscientists at my disposal. We put an EEG cap to measure brain waves and brainwave activity on one member of 7 volunteer groups of student volunteers. So we wanted to find out what's going on during these Power of 8 groups, these 10-minute sessions of holding a thought together. And we thought it was going to look exactly like meditation, that these brainwave signatures would be just like those of meditation. And we were shocked when they weren't. They were nothing like it. So I'll let Dr. Stephanie Sullivan give you a quick rundown.
So honestly, we found some pretty amazing results. Now, qualifying that, and that this was a case series where we only had 6 individuals that we were looking at. But to be honest, it was amazing. Across the board, we had one participant that varied slightly, but everyone else actually had a decrease in their frontal lobe, their parietal lobe, and their temporal lobe, and with some additional decrease in their occipital lobe. And all of this was on the right side of their brain. And of course, my natural thought is that, okay, this is going to look like meditation. So I was honestly surprised when it didn't look like the traditional meditation studies that we've seen where there was an increase in alpha.
In meditation studies, you see an increase in certain brain waves, the slower brain waves, alpha brain waves. Here we were talking about, what she was talking about is we weren't experiencing an increase in brain waves. Many of them were turning off, they were dialed down. So what we ended up showing was a quieting of all brain waves, but particularly the frontal and parietal lobes. Those are the lobes that sit on the top of the back of the head, and they help us navigate through space. They tell us, this is me, this is not me. And they were dialed way down, like a blurring between what is me and what's not me. And they looked nothing like meditation, but they looked exactly, almost identical to the work done by Dr. Andrew Newberg, who studied Sufi masters during chanting and Buddhist monks during ecstatic prayer, and exactly the same thing occurred. Quieting of the parietal lobes and the frontal lobes, blurring between me and not me. These were people in a state of ecstatic oneness, as they are when it's a Buddhist monk. And yet, these are people also who had never meditated before, never done a Power of 8 group. And so what I understood was the big secret sauce to healing is that feeling of oneness. We all talk about how we're all one, but we don't experience life like that. We don't experience life like that. We experience life in separation as lonely little people on a lonely planet in a lonely universe. So I think that is the healing that happens. There are all of those things, but that is number one. And the love, like Jerry, who was part of one of my year-long master classes. This is what happened to him.
But the biggest thing is sense of compassion, empathy, love, caring that we have for each other. I can't replace that. I've done better in the COVID season than I have at any time in my life, I think, certainly in terms of just being able to be connected with people. You can feel the love. I mean, I now know what love feels like when you're getting it from other people over the airwaves.
And that was Jerry, who wanted to join during lockdown. He joined a year-long class and he loved it so much he joined it again. And I said, Jerry, why are you taking this again? He said, I wanted more. I've had more love this year than I've ever had in my life. And so that's the other secret sauce. And I think this segues into some questions you may have, Dr. Keneally, but certainly I know that what I see is probably what you see, in that you say, if somebody isn't prepared to change their diet and look at their emotions, I can't help them. And that's what I see. I see the love, the caring, the connection, the altruism. This is astonishing and miraculous in its ability to heal.
Right. That's, in medical school and in training. And I remember doing psychiatry many, many years ago, and we were doing ECT at the time and medicine. There was nothing about the emotional attunement that patients may need. And so years ago, 21 years ago, I was having my own life crises. And one of my employees had recommended me, oh, you need to go see a life coach. And I'm like, okay, how can a life coach help me? Right. And so I remember I thought about it and I'm like, okay, I have nothing to lose. I can walk out and it can be terrible. Well, I went to this life coach and it was probably most transformative thing in my life. And because let's face it, none of us have leave it to beaver households. And we all grow up was some kind of discord, so to speak. And so that was the most amazing thing. And then that led me to where we are today, 21 years. And I would say that unresolved emotional conflict trauma is probably the number one thing that we all have to address. Okay. None of us are exempt from the process. And now we know that that trauma is what you inherit, your hair color, skin color, eye color, etc., is not just from mom and dad. It actually goes back 9 generations of emotional DNA that we inherit. And so we all need to do a self-conscious evaluation and do it with somebody, because you can't do it by yourself. And you've demonstrated that in your Power of 8. And, this gentleman was talking about the love that he received. And years ago, I was in the Grand Canyon, and we were doing these 10-mile hikes. And this doctor asked me, he was a rehabilitation doctor, so he helped people rehabilitate. And he goes, "So how would you describe your practice?" And I said, "Love is the medicine for everything." And you talked about the oneness, and love is the medicine, just like he was saying. And so, I still continue to grow, just like you're growing and you're expanding. And, the books that you read, the work you do and share with Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden and all the other people. And lots of people now are out there talking about how emotions rule our existence, and how now you're talking about the Power of 8. But I want to ask you, because I always, people always have a seed. So how do you think this seed got planted in you?
In me?
Uh-huh.
I guess I've probably always been a spiritual seeker of some sort. Even in my teen years, I was also interested in natural food. I grew up in a household where if it didn't come in a box and it wasn't pre-processed, we didn't eat it, except if it was a TV dinner in aluminum foil. So you can imagine, I mean, my teeth did not survive this very well. I've got loads of fillings, unfortunately, with this kind of food upbringing. But I learned early on, I was a real early eater of granola and all of those things. But I was always interested in where spirituality could lead to, and esoterica. But it wasn't until I started studying alternative medicine, and I started coming across very good studies of spiritual healing. And I thought to myself, well, wait a minute. If somebody can have a thought and send it to someone else and make them better, then that undermines everything we think about how the world works. So I set out trying to find out why. And I thought I was going to find something like human energy fields, but that led me to talking to a lot of pioneering scientists working in consciousness research. And that ended up being the field, my book, The Field. And I think writing that book changed the messenger. I suddenly realized this is my subject, but I need to dive deeper. And each time, I guess I've made a life out of my enthusiasms, Lee Aaron. I mean, my enthusiasms for alternative medicine, my enthusiasms for uncovering the best kinds of healing.
Right.
And my enthusiasm for where science and spirituality lead have probably got me to this place. And, with writers and researchers, you keep wanting to look deeper. And so that's what really propels me. That and a real sense of, I really like helping people.
Right. So I know that you're always constantly trying to share, just like I do. So what is your favorite part about sharing your findings? And, a lot of people just don't know about this. Like you say, alternative medicine. I don't really call it alternative medicine. I tell people these things have been around actually a long time, and we're bringing them to life.
Absolutely. And we're bringing them back. you know, and so much of this, I mean, a Power of Eight group, you know, if you go into the Bible, you see that in the Acts, Jesus, when he, you know, he gave the disciples instructions about how to spread this word. And his instructions were always pray in a group because you will heal and you will be healed. So it's not new, but I think what's new is that there's now science behind it. You know, I've run 41 very well controlled experiments showing that group intention can do all sorts of things. And we're seeing it in the people that, you know, that we heal, and the people who heal not only physically, but they heal aspects of their lives, like Mitchell Dean. You know, I have all kinds of people who join my courses, my master class, who always promised to write that book and never did. And they do. I have 4 people who've had bestsellers because they've joined and they've had that group, and they've had to make, the group has propelled them to do it, I think. Or we've had people who had financial woes. And I've seen so many people. I had one woman who was down to her last 200 pounds, and she lived in the UK. And the group intended for her to get a windfall. And lo and behold, a few weeks later, she gets a letter from Lloyd's of London, where she had worked years before, saying, you are eligible to apply for a grant. She did, and got a big check. And that kind of thing happens all the time. And with work too, people finding new careers. So I think it is, as I mentioned before, there's something about group support. We don't have that anymore. We have even less of it after COVID. You know, we're so isolated. And I was fascinated when we talk about cancer. I was fascinated by the work of Kelly Turner, who did this book, Radical Remission, and looked at why cancer no-hopers, so-called no-hopers, reverse their cancer, and what are their common threads. And she found 9 aspects of what they had, how they treated themselves, that were that were vital and that were common among all of them. And what I was fascinated to see is only 2 of them, only 2 of the 9 had to do with physical stuff. Everything else had to do with healing your emotions, having groups, having support, having loved ones, having a spiritual life. You know, those kinds of things were more healing than almost anything else. So, and of course, the healing stuff, the stuff they did was all integrative. It wasn't anything like, you know, it wasn't
that they're
the traditional stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
No. So that fascinated me because it talked about emotions and our spiritual life and our community as not just being nice things to do, but being essential to our healing.
Right. Yeah. And when I do lectures on cancer, I go over the 9 things, and I say none of it had to do with their conventional guidance by an oncologist. So it's stunning, and it's so sad that people don't know about that. So
no.
And their doctors, if they mention it to their physicians, the doctors are like, oh, that doesn't do anything, you know. So they immediately mentally, emotionally, spiritually get discouraged, right? Because it's so important how we all speak to one of each other, and we should be declaring victory on one another all the time. So
absolutely. Well, it was like Esther in the library. Esther, who comes to the retreat defeated because she's been told you've got 3 or 4 months to live. My mother-in-law had the same thing. She was diagnosed with late-stage breast cancer, and the doctor said, get her things in order. She's got 3 or 4 months to live. And I mean, she was getting sick on the street then. You know, it was a death sentence. She was too late for any chemo or radiotherapy. So we brought her to an integrative specialist in the UK. And he examined her. I was in the room with him. And her breast, by the way, was like raw meat. Her doctor had recoiled when he examined her. So Patrick, the doctor that we brought her to, looks at her breast, and I'm right there in the room, and he says, we can handle that. And I thought, whoa, she is healed right then and there. And he reversed her cancer and she lived many more years. But I believe that probably the best medicine he just gave her was hope. You know, he said, yeah, we can handle this. And
Right.
hope is probably one of the most underappreciated medicines there is.
Right. So in your whole life experience, what is the most, powerful example that you've seen in all these years?
All these years of people healing,
Healing, yes. What would you
in the Power of Eight groups. Well, I guess the people getting up out of their wheelchairs was pretty amazing, pretty astonishing. Um, I think it was people who started out really defeated and have completely turned around, like Andy Spiros. Andy was a really great example. Andy was going through a divorce when she came to my master class, and she was really defeated because she had sold her gift store business. She had 2 young children, really needed money, and couldn't get a job every time. And she was talented, a talented coach and a talented marketer, couldn't get a job. So she's going on and getting nowhere with her group. And I finally just said, Andy, get off of yourself. Do an intention for this young kid. There was the stepfather of this young boy, Luke, had written to me because he followed my work and his stepson had tried to commit suicide. He was 15, had broken up with his first serious girlfriend, and in a fit of adolescent angst, chucked himself off of a 40-foot structure onto hard ground. And the doctors didn't think he was going to live. He had brain damage, nerve damage, broke every bone in his body. It's a pretty scary sight looking at the photo of him. So I had my whole masterclass do intentions for Luke on successive Sundays, including Andy. Now, Luke responded every time we did it. His stepfather kept a running commentary of what was going on. So that was pretty amazing. And Luke got out of the hospital in record time. Remember, the doctors didn't even think he was going to live. And he's now a normal, I think, 21-year-old. But a really interesting thing happened to Andy, and probably that's the point of the story. Andy, the next week, gets a call out of nowhere from somebody offering her her dream job, somebody she didn't even know, and goes on to have such a muddled divorce that the lawyers on both sides asked her for her secret so that they could copy it with future clients. So that seems to happen all the time. And so I guess my favorite stuff is what happens to the people who get off of themselves and start intending for someone else. And I think that's the beauty of a Power of Eight group. 7/8 of the time, if it's 8 people in the group, it doesn't have to be 8, it can be 7, it can be 9. But the beauty is 7/8 of the time you're intending for someone else. And same thing happened to Lisa. Lisa was stuck. She was trying to write a book. She's a bodywork practitioner, wanted to write a book about something she discovered about a way to treat trauma, but she was getting nowhere. She was on her 3rd editor. She couldn't write. She was terrified of marketing it, didn't know what to do. So I tell her, Lisa, try intending for someone else, somebody who needs it more in your group. So she does. And the very next week, I swear to you, she gets compelled to go into this shop, doesn't even need anything in this shop in her hometown, goes in there and sees somebody that she actually vaguely got introduced to a long time ago, she knows the face, is compelled, and she's a shy woman, but compelled nevertheless to go up and say hi. Turns out the woman is a former publisher, now a book coach. When she hears Lisa's work and what she's trying to do, she offers to take her through the whole process. Upshot is she publishes the book, it becomes an Amazon bestseller. So those are the kinds of stories that are my favorite, is where people got off of themselves and their lives completely transformed.
Right. So we need to make this a contagious worldwide phenomena, Lynn. So tell everyone how they can learn more about the Power of Eight.
Thank you so much. So you can come to my website, lynnmctaggart.com. That's Lynn with an E, L-Y-N-N-E, and McTaggart is A-R-T.com. And you'll find all kinds of tools that you can start you off. Even when you join my community, you can put a notice up to start a Power of 8 group. There are free tools to use it in your community, to use Power of 8 tools. There's all kinds of courses you can take from me if you want to study with me. And what's coming up is my Power of 8 Intention Masterclass, my year-long course, which starts February 17th. And I teach you live and interactive for 6 successive Saturdays for 2-hour sessions. And then I put you into a group in your time zone and preferred meeting time. And we monitor and coach you through the whole year.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'm sure many people are going to be interested in all your work and be participating in these magical groups. So thank you so much, Lynn, for being with me today and part of my journey. And I look forward to both of us collaborating continuously to, literally transform the future of health and humanity.
I look forward to that too. Thank you so much, Dr. Keneally.
You're welcome. Okay, thank you, Lynn, for being with me today, and I look forward to launching this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lee Aaron. It was great, and thank you for doing that for me. To be continued between us. We've got lots to do together.
Yes,
absolutely.
All right.
And my team are on it with designing that special 8-page stuff for you for with your columns.
Okay.
And let's talk more.
Okay.
We've got loads to do together.
All right. Thank you, Lynn. Talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye.